Welcome back to Ethical Point. Let's dive straight into today's explainer, because we're looking at the absolute high-stakes reality of civil service decision-making. This isn't just some dry textbook theory. Just think back to the devastating policy paralysis we saw a few years ago. That was a direct failure of public servants to make timely decisions. It literally stalled massive national projects and choked off foreign investment. Decision-making is the vital pulse of administration. So here's our roadmap for the explainer. We'll hit the public service mandate, dive into good governance and probity, break down the DoPT 4E framework, look at the steps for ethical decision-making, and finally, wrap it all up with a UPSC answer writing guide. Nailing this exact flow is going to directly translate to high-scoring answers for your GS paper IB. Starting off with Section 1, the public service mandate and how government compares to the private sector.
Right. And before we get bogged down in heavy frameworks, let me just play the skeptic for a second. Why does the government even need to intervene in all these services? Why not just let the private market handle things efficiently?
That is the perfect question, and it gets right to the core of the public service mandate. The contrast between these two sectors is incredibly sharp. The public sector's entire focus is fulfilling basic human needs. We're talking water, healthcare, ensuring broad accessibility so people can live with dignity. Now, flip that to the private sector. They operate strictly on profit maximization. They literally require exclusivity to realize their value. They just don't have the capacity or, frankly, the interest to invest in non-viable areas like universal rural connectivity. That's exactly why we need government intervention and subsidies. Okay, the broad economic theory makes sense, but what does that actually look like on the ground when things go wrong?
Well, look at how dangerous unchecked externalities can be. Take the fertilizer sector, for instance. If the government didn't step in to regulate gas prices for fertilizer production, unchecked private sector pricing would just cause fertilizer costs to absolutely skyrocket. That externality would completely devastate dependent sectors like agriculture, and it would put this unbearable financial burden directly on our farmers.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2, good governance and probity. The philosophical basis of it all, to ensure essential services actually reach people, especially marginalized groups who need that extra push. We absolutely have to have a strong philosophical foundation, and that rests on two pillars, good governance and probity. Now, the formal 1992 World Bank definition says, good governance is the manner in which power is exercised in managing a country's economic and social resources for development. The absolute key here is putting citizens right at the center of decision-making. Let me pause you there and just translate that into a layman's definition for our listeners. Basically, it just means actively protecting human rights and engaging civil society in everyday administration, instead of just, ruling from the top down. Spot on, and its vital companion is probity. Officially, probity is the strict adherence to the highest principles and ideals of honesty, integrity, and decency in a process. It goes way beyond just avoiding corrupt practices.
Right, so in simple terms, having probity means doing the right thing in the most honorable way possible. Like, it makes you the absolute last person on earth who would ever accept a bribe or tell a lie in office.
But let's look at real administrative dilemmas for a second. Where do we actually see a lack of probity causing friction in the system?
Oh, we've seen massive friction recently. Just think about the SSE exam paper leaks involving students and test centers, or even at the highest judicial levels. Remember when senior Supreme Court judges raised very serious questions about the Chief Justice's allocation of cases? When probity is missing, it fundamentally destroys public trust in the basic processes of our most crucial institutions.
So, to maintain that trust, an administrator has to rely on 4 core principles of probity. First, accountability, which just means fully accepting responsibility for your actions. Then transparency, being open in your decisions and actually giving reasons for them. Third is impartiality, ensuring equal treatment. Think about how crucial that is for a body like TRI when they're handling intense telecom disputes. And finally, avoiding conflict of interest through complete disclosure.
Impartiality makes total sense for a regulator like TRI. But transparency? Should public transparency ever actually be restricted?
That is a fantastic question, and the answer is a resounding yes. We address this through the principle of confidentiality. Public transparency absolutely can and does conflict with administrative duties. Information gets restricted, but only when the wider public or national interest demands it. A really good example is lead banks. They strictly protect the confidential details of their borrowers because doing that maintains overall financial stability. Moving on to Section 3, the DoPT 4E framework and Competence Dictionary. This is where the theory turns into a vital tool. Let's see how the 2013 DoPT Competence Dictionary builds a real structural framework for effective public administration. The magic really happens in this 4E matrix. The DoPT outlines ethos, ethics, equity, and efficiency for the public sector. And look at the logic here. These public administration virtues perfectly mirror the essential corporate virtues for the private sector. Ethos aligns beautifully with corporate social responsibility. Ethics mirrors corporate transparency. Equity is exactly like dealing fairly with minority shareholders. And efficiency maps directly to corporate accountability to boards and employees. It is a brilliant conceptual parallel.
I do love the matrix. It's fantastic for grasping the virtues. But, as an on-field civil servant, I need an actionable framework when I'm staring down a crisis. How do we actually make these decisions step by step? Completely agree. Let's get into Section 4, the ethical decision-making steps, and break down exactly how to approach this on the ground. But before you follow any technical steps, you have to internalize this quote. Always treat others the way you want yourself to be treated. That is the golden rule of decision-making. An administrator has to stick to this foundational principle to maintain absolute courtesy and decency. And that's especially true when you are ruling against someone's vested interests. Keeping that rule in mind, here is your 5-step approach to resolving dilemmas. Step 1. Explore the issue carefully for any moral considerations. Step 2. Gather relevant facts and insights objectively. Step 3. Consider all the stakeholders involved. Step 4. Evaluate the potential consequences, looking at the pros and cons of each option. And Step 5. Choose the final solution by checking both legal compliance and ethical standards.
And I just have to chime in on Step 2. Reading firsthand data yourself is so critical. You just cannot rely on hearsay or secondary summaries if you want to maintain completely objective, rational judgments.
But let's be realistic here. I'm going to play the skeptic on administrative perfection. What actually happens when a perfectly planned decision using all 5 steps still completely fails? Because, let's face it, administrative failure is a reality.
Oh, it absolutely is. Decisions do fail, no matter how well planned. And when they do, administrators just have to remain resilient. You cannot let a failure paralyze you. You have to learn from those past mistakes and actively promote team building. That shared resilience is exactly what allows an administration to handle tremendous pressure and pivot effectively when things go south.
All right, bringing us to our final part, Section 5, the UPSC Answer Writing Guide. For all our focused learners out there, let's explicitly translate everything we've just talked about into a high-scoring exam strategy for your mains. Here is how you put it on paper. So here's your comprehensive blueprint for structuring a 10 or 15-marker GS Paper 4 answer. Kick off your introduction with those standard definitions for good governance or probity that we laid out earlier. In the body, map out the administrative dilemmas using the DoPT 4E framework. For the application part, cite real-world issues like those SSC leaks or the telecom disputes to show the examiner you grasp the ground reality. Then, frame your way forward using that 5-step decision-making process. Finally, wrap up with a conclusion framed around the golden rule and long-term public interest. Seriously, this is your perfect exam room toolkit. We're going to leave you with one final provocative thought. How will you apply the principle of probity to resolve the very next ethical dilemma you encounter in public service? Whether you're analyzing today's news or prepping for real-life governance challenges, we really encourage all aspiring civil servants to start actively applying these frameworks right now. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer. Stay focused and keep learning.